So we start with who is Krishna?
Sure.
Well, Prabhupada's famous phrase is Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A very, very interesting expression. It was satisfying to me in the beginning because I had definite issues with the word God. But Supreme Personality of Godhead was different. If you unpack it, there's the word Godhead. That's a word that denotes, in the abstract, the entire absolute truth. It comes into English from German mysticism, from Gottheit, in the 14th century or something like that, 15th century. It means, when we say absolute truth, it means the entire source of everything. The absolute truth means that from which everything comes, the ultimate source of all energies. You really have a choice in your beliefs. One choice is everything comes from nothing, or everything comes from something. Of course, modern scientists and philosophers are trying to make everything comes from nothing plausible. But if you don't accept that, because it really is very hard to believe, then everything must come from something. That comes down to the cause of everything, which has everything that's manifest is originally there in the source. So that's Godhead. Personality of Godhead derives from the idea that's described in the Bhagavatam, that the researchers, the investigators into this absolute truth, one name for it in Sanskrit is tattva, the fundamental principle of everything, the fundamental reality there, and people have investigated it, not by means that we know, but by spiritual exploration, by yogic discipline, by the expansion of consciousness. They have investigated it. There's procedures for this investigation which can be duplicated. So these researchers have described this single non-dual substance in three different ways. One is the impersonal, undifferentiated ocean of light, as Brahman. People have encountered this all over the world in all different kinds of mystic traditions. You find this encounter with this single, undifferentiated ocean of spiritual light, into which one has the experience sometimes of merging or becoming one with, and later find it very difficult to describe. This is reported by Eastern mystics, Hindu mystics, Buddhist mystics, even Christian mystics have described this Brahman. But there's another feature that has been encountered of the same absolute truth as Paramatma, the super soul. One method brings us to this Brahman realization or experience. The other brings us to the super soul realization that there is me, the self, and when I discover myself, which is of the same nature as this Brahman, there's also the discovery of a super self, or the self of all selves. And this self, which I can contact by introspection and purification, is also the self of all other living beings, and is in fact the soul of the universe. To borrow a term from Philip K. Dick, he had a novel called Valis, V-A-L-I-S, that stood for Vast, Active, Living, Intelligent System. That sort of describes Supersoul. Then there's the other feature, which is Bhagavan, Brahman, Paramatman, and then Bhagavan. And Bhagavan is what Prabhupada calls the personality of Godhead, or the supreme personality of Godhead. The absolute truth is, first of all, a person. The Supersoul has personal attributes. Bhagavan is, but the Supersoul is this person only insofar as he is running the universe and dealing with the souls that are in the material world. That's a limited conception of God. This is God, how he's dealing with his material energies. But he also has spiritual energies in the spiritual realm. When he's in his own realm, separate from the material world, then the Bhagavan feature is manifest. The personality of Godhead. His full personality is there. Brahman is the source of everything. Everything that we see in this world comes from that. There are personalities in this world, and so also there must be personalities in the source. You cannot give what you have not got. The cause is greater than the effect. So we see all kinds of persons here, so therefore we can have to assume that God is also a person. Person means endowed with senses, a sentient being who has senses. And that automatically means a spiritual form. I am a person with senses, and what we call my body is just an organized arrangement of these senses. Senses means the instruments for perceiving the environment, and the instruments like my hands and legs for acting on the environment. So that's what we mean by person. So the absolute truth is not less than its creation in anything, so there is personality of Godhead. If God is a person, one among many, that would be a limitation. He would be a this and a not that. So actually, the Lord has many forms. He is a single individual, but because he deals in so many different relationships, he also is a different personality. It's like one of us can have different personalities. I may be one way with my students, another way with my wife, another way with my children. If I have a job, I maybe act a different way there. So in different social roles and relationships, we have different ways of dressing, different ways of acting, behaving, and so does the Lord. But he does it all at the same time. We have to do it sequentially. So that's what we mean, supreme personality of Godhead. That's all a kind of abstract argument. Then the further claim is made that supreme personality of Godhead is Krishna. And the Bhagavatam tells us who Krishna is and what he is like and what he does and what his relationships are and how he behaves. The Bhagavatam is basically his biography, partial biography of the supreme personality of Godhead. I can make a case that the absolute truth is a person, and this person will have to be the greatest, the most attractive, whatever the superlatives are there. God must be the best of all. I can only say that Krishna, as described in Srimad Bhagavatam, is the one I accept. And I haven't seen anywhere any description of anyone conceivably greater somebody can show me, I'll be happy to look at it. And of course, people who have explored the absolute truth, just like some have experienced Brahman, some have experienced Paramatma. Usually these are cumulative. If you have experience of Brahma, that's partial. If you have Paramatma realization, you will also have Brahman realization. And then Bhagavan realization, well, you can have that, and also Paramatma and Brahman realization. Bhagavan, Paramatma, all three are there in realization of Brahman. One other thing, when we think of God, we think of the Almighty, which He is. And that's the way people worship God mostly, as the Almighty. This is one form of the personality of Godhead. But God has other features, which is sweetness. When He's encountered as the Almighty, He inspires awe and reverence. There's a complete understanding of the ontological gap between us and God. And there's a certain amount of being overawed and kind of fearful, stand off, and feel little and tiny. This, to God, sometimes puts a limitation on Him because He wants to have intimate relationships with devotees. So therefore, in His form of Krishna, this is the intimate. He causes some devotees to kind of forget that He is God, so they can enter into more personal relationships. So the personality of Godhead as, say, Narayan, His majesty overwhelms and overawes us, and His sweetness is veiled. But as Krishna, His sweetness overpowers His majesty, and that's what we mean by Krishna. So Krishna is the private life of God. And as Krishna, He seems to be a village boy in a rural setting. All the trappings of the urban Krishna with majesty and chariots and castles and all those things and many queens, that's not evident. And this is higher. If you meet the president at a state occasion, well, you've arrived somewhat. But if you get to go, to the White House on an informal Sunday morning and sit around with him and his family and his wife, you've more arrived. So this is the highest realization of Krishna. This is a flight path.
I guess it is.
It's not all of them. Some of them, they come here and they go over to New Jersey and they go down to the airport.